I literally threw up 2 middle fingers in a pastor's meeting and walked out of the church. I was 23, disillusioned, and I just walked away from the religious establishment that I spent my college years studying. I wish I could say that I followed Jesus really closely after that, but I can't. Many of us have been going through a deconstruction of faith, a sifting of the soul, being salted with fire. Our faith is being tested, because an untested faith is really just a belief system. It all typically starts with an existential crisis that leaves us questioning the purpose of life, or even questioning a God that we've been brought up to believe. My existential crisis came in 2018 through 2020, and I hit rock bottom. It left me with conversations with death, because this just wasn't a dark night of the soul. This was me coming to an end of myself, giving up because I had nothing else to give. I remember crying out, God, just let me die. If you send me to hell, then so be it. I deserve it. But if you decide that I live, you've got to help me. This chaos and this torment have got to subside. And under a magnolia tree in Rehab, God spoke to me in a breeze, and I have never been the same. See, I grew up in the church. Not that my parents made me go. I actually wanted to go. So much so that I felt called to ministry around the age of 17. So when my college years came, I went off to study theology. And I quickly realized that what is said in the pulpit doesn't necessarily line up with what the scriptures are saying. Religious leaders twist those books to fit whatever ideology that suits them. And before graduation, I became disillusioned. Not just from what was said in the pulpit, but also the religious culture that the church exudes. And I was in the middle of it. The belly of the beast. I literally threw up 2 middle fingers in a pastor's meeting and walked out of the church. It wasn't my proudest moment, and I wish that I could say that I followed Jesus really closely after that, but I can't. I was 23, I was disillusioned, and what better way to cope than to self-medicate with drugs, clubs, and alcohol. I remember telling my dad that I'm going to take off my Bible belt to see what happens. And he shot back, well, just don't bring home any kids. So after 18 months of self-indulgence, the prodigal came home. No kids. It was time for me to get my act together. I stopped doing ecstasy, I stopped going to raves, and I got married, started going back to church, even though it kind of felt off-putting because, we switched churches. I hadn't put down the alcohol because it was legal and I wasn't abusing it yet. I tried to prove to everyone that I was a good candidate for pastorship. The more I strived, the more I would self-sabotage. I was covering this inner truth that was inside, but I was also trying to numb this imposter syndrome I was feeling. I became a religious narcissist, a pastor's crony, the very thing that I abhorred. The consequences of me ignoring my emotional, mental, and spiritual health led to self-hatred that expressed itself through bouts of alcohol abuse. This exasperated my wife for 18 years. And in May of 2018, I was laid off from a financial institution. I couldn't find another job, so I began day drinking. And she followed that with divorce papers. The confusion brought on despair. Despair introduced me to the abyss. If you stare too long into the abyss, it stares back at you and begins to beckon you. I hit rock bottom in the darkest of nights. It was Christmas night, 2018. My family had had enough, and they demanded that I go to a hotel room, escorted by the police, mind you. And when I went into that room, I had no plans of coming back out alive. After I had purposed this in my heart, about an hour, my phone rings. It was Dana, my best friend during my college years. We had lost touch for about 5 to 7 years or so. We hadn't really talked except for social media. And her first words were, "I feel like something's wrong." That's when I realized God still cared. In my darkest hour, He reached out. God so loved me that He wouldn't leave me there. Jesus says that everyone will be salted with fire. Hotter the fire, more pure the gold. It's a catchy idiom until you're in it. The "well done" well done, my good and faithful servant, is a cooking temperature apparently. And but God wasn't punishing me. He was allowing the consequences of my actions to come bearing down on me. Because what you sow, you will reap. Karma's a bitch, and no one is comfortable when God turns up the heat. And I was burnt up, burnt out, vulnerable, raw. All the stuff that I had built my life upon was taken away and burned away in the chaff. We pray more of you, God, until you realize that means less of me. The most dangerous prayer is to say, "God, whatever it takes." Well, it took me 5 white chips from Alcoholics Anonymous, 5 stints in a detox facility, and a 28-day stay in rehab. I can safely say that of all the people that I personally know, I am the worst. I had to leave church to find God. My preconceived thoughts about God melted like wax. The salting of fire burned away the old wineskins, my old patterns of thinking, a deconstruction of my faith. Because the religious map that I had bought into and studied for years did not align with my journey. All my pastor friends would not touch me with a 10-foot pole. I became persona non grata, a gay divorce attorney that my ex-wife hired had compassion on me and advocated to me Alcoholics Anonymous. He could have raked me over the coals, but his partner became my grand sponsor. I came to the end of myself, my strivings, my attachments, my dreams. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps until you realize that your boots are encased in concrete. The winnowing fork, the sifting of my soul from its attachments, its accomplishments, notions of fundamentals, and it just left me stripped, naked, powerless. I was faithless, except for this one tiny inkling of a sliver of faith, because that's all I had. But that sliver was all he needed. So what did the Spirit say to me under that magnolia tree? It has become the cornerstone of my faith. In order for you to be secure in this life, you have to forgive yourself and remain vulnerable. that's backwards. That's my kingdom. You see, my whole life I've been covering my insecurities and childhood trauma with humor and arrogance, charm and anger, and anything that I could use to distract anyone from seeing the scared little boy inside. Those past protective walls, they became my prison. In 2018 through 2020 was designed to burn down those walls and reveal the creative soul that God has melded me to be. See, I assumed that one promising day God was going to give me a magical puzzle piece that's going to fit perfectly into my life and have it all make sense and settle all the chaos and the torment. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. I was banging my head against the wall about this. Then it hit me. Go watch a Japanese swordsmith. Go watch a Japanese swordsmith. Thankfully, we have YouTube. As I watched the Japanese swordsmith take the raw material, the iron ore, and put it inside the fiery furnace, bring it out, and made it pliable, and he starts hammering away at it. And all the sparks and stuff that you see flying off is actually the impurities coming out. And after some time, chunks and pieces begin to fall off of it. And he can tell which ones are the high carbon and which ones are the low carbon. The high carbon is for the hard outer shell, it holds the edge. And the low carbon is softer and more pliable. So you gotta have both, or it'll just be a brittle sword or too soft. But what caught my attention was that when the pieces would fall off, they looked like puzzle pieces. And the swordsmith takes all the pieces and puts them on top of each other, puts it back into the fire, brings it out, hammers it and melds it into one. Folds it, puts it back in, brings it back out, hammers it flat, folds it again, and does that about 7 times until both piles are ready to come in as one. So it's not about a magical puzzle piece falling out of the sky and making your life make sense, but it is God melding the pieces of your life together and shaping you for purpose. Scalpels are more powerful than swords. Now, if this has encouraged you, then great. Please like and share. But more importantly, if you have thought of someone, send this to them. Because you never know. It just might be the right place at the right time. Thank you.